in the days when the ritual consumption of human flesh was a part of their daily life, it steered into these issues. See, it would be naive to deny that in times of war, native fighters might not burn the corpse of their slain foe, and as a demonstration of fearlessness to their people and utter ruthlessness to their enemies, eat some part of the flesh of their slain opponents. However, this tale of cannibalism as a habit, involving roasting of human flesh with the addition of spices, one of scarcity of meat, and the craving for flesh, as the governor relayed, is quite another thing altogether. In any case, I have always thought it strange that it was in Africa, a part of the world which in the mind of the average Westerner is more known for its teeming wildlife than its people, that it was said that humans consumed human flesh out of meat. It was ironic because it was, after all, the abundance of the blessings from nature's bosom which God had chosen to lavish on the land had induced Sherwood Smith's government to first send its explorers, David Livingstone's, Mungo Parks, etc., to scout and record the nature and extent of these blessings before the traders and administrators then came out to harvest the bounty, repatriation back to their homeland. The straight-talking Lord Frederick Lagarde, the chief British architect of Nigeria, whose wife gave the country his name, admitted this much in his own memoirs. Frederick Lagarde. The tropics are the heritage of mankind. Talking about Nigeria, the tropics are the heritage, and neither, on the one as the suzerain of power, a right to their exclusive exploitation. No? On the other hand, have the races which inhibit them a right to deny their bounties to those who need them. The colonialist. Sherwood Smith claimed that in the fiendish practice that he was reporting, elderly were preyed upon was even more outlandish. Me as one who had spent his early years amongst villagers who, though rendered poor and miserable by the mismanagement of successive governments, nature's bounty, still held to the custom of tending farms, neighbors who were too sick to toil, and of sending their young children to take meals across to the infirm in the long-established tradition of care in the community. My interest in how Nigeria took the wrong turn led to an introduction to one of the elder statesmen whose political career straddled the before and the after of their independence, who was then living abroad in exile from the Abacha regime. Chief Anthony, and now significance in the Nigeria story is testified to by the fact that his flight to Britain for refuge from charges of high treason in 1963, on a first round of exile in the wake of Nigeria's immediate post-independence crisis, filled the pages of the answered report on the UK Parliament proceedings. Such was the political storm that over the extradition of this small yet extraordinary man, that it menaced the stability of the conservative government of the day and contributed to its fall, despite the fact that in the end, it only granted extradition request on the strict condition that it was executed. It's thus declared dead. December 2010, table being covered in the literary pages of all the leading British newspapers while its service was in Westminster Cathedral. Enaoro was of the royal line in the Kingdom of Benin, with which the Royal Court of Portugal first established diplomatic relations through the Portuguese explorers in the course of their quest for the new sea route to Asia in the mid-15th century. One of the many historical anecdotes that I picked up from him was one which had been passed down as to how the Portuguese had been extremely civil and respectful during these first visits. What I have never been able to work out is, and now right said, was caused, so what caused them to change was the question he asked repeatedly in his closing years. According to Enao, the first contact that the Western people have with the people of this Nigeria, the Portuguese established a diplomatic relationship with the kingdom. And he said they were so civil and respectful. That didn't last long. Others were coming. Okay? So yes, being one of the first of a new generation of Nigerians in the diaspora who had been through the same primary, secondary, and university education experience as the colonial administrators, and more importantly, same opportunities for self-education that life in the West offers. I had more than a casual interest in the character of this young practitioner, but laws at such an age. Now, their handiwork is defined by successive Nigerian leaders. The process of deification was captured in the words of Malcolm Muggeridge. It is said, went out to the empire in 1920s. On his memoir, I said, from the moment of landing in Colombo, I was made conscious of my status as a Sahib. It was like suddenly inheriting a peerage, and being addressed as my lord, just by virtue of being English and white. If you went to buy a ticket at a railway station, it made way for you. Similarly, in a shop, it was very insidious. At first, I found it embarrassing and distasteful. Then, though, I continued to ridicule it. I came to count upon receiving special treatment. Finally, when for some reason it was not accorded, there was an impulse to become sulky and irritated. From that, it was but a small step to shouting and insisting, as in the days of Raj, I saw happen often. Why some went in search of adventure and the which knowledge was testifying, others were motivated by a sort of missionary idealism of the Victorian era. Even in England, I had the good fortune of speaking with one or two of the key players on the Nigerian colonial scene, in the course of which I was able to tease out some reflections. In one of the darkest moments of the country's distant political history, I had set out to bring together as many of them as I could for an on-camera discussion with Enao. The topic was to have been how the Nigerians missed the road to this land. Britain being famous for the vibrancy of its networks, it was not long before I had drawn up an impressive list, which included John Hilary Smith, CB, who had been Deputy Secretary to Nigeria's Prime Minister at independence, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. He was, in fact, still in post up until the time of Balewa's death in the first military coup in January 1966. Fortunately, dialogue for posterity between the old colonialist and the old nationalist never happened. There was, however, one former colonial officer with whom I enjoyed a correspondence, Mr. Don Patton, that he had served in East Africa and North Nigeria, was of little consequences in terms of understanding the characters of colonial cadets. It It may, in fact, have accounted for me alone being prepared to engage on these issues. After receiving my from Nigeria, which the Economic Research Council had published in 2022. In the course of our correspondence, we provided the insights, perspective of the administrator. Now, here is what Don Pato told his teacher. Okay. One characteristic of colonial rule was that whilst we were attached to our work, we were detached from any overriding loyalties. After 50, 60 years of colonialism, it was possible for Nigerians to accept decisions and advice of an alien district officer, for example, knowing that he was detached, whereas it was later not possible to accept it from Nigerians of other nationalities. And these potential internal frictions were concealed under the colonial umbrella. I've expressed that loudly. Nowhere was this scenario clearer than in the army. The Nigerian army could be loyal to a colonial government because in the context of local nationalities, it was neutral. But after independence, these nationalities within the army developed national loyalties or reverted to them. I think it's probable that because these national loyalties were contained several decades, the colonial government of the day overlooked the potential deconstruction, so that the independence constitution was too optimistic. I think we're all over optimistic about the state and did not anticipate local frictions arising after independence. Although there was certain evidence of this in Nigeria, the state had functioned under colonial rule, and there seemed to be, no reason why this should not continue after independence. But in reality, nationalism was primarily a response to colonial rule, representing a wish for independence. There was no underlying sense of national unity in most cases. Thus, Tanzania and Zambia are perhaps exceptions. Primary loyalty was to family, clan, and tribe, not to the country. In Tanzania, even the district could be an alien concept. But what saved the day here was that there were no serious tribal rivalries. Neither was any tribal group sufficiently large to inspire to dominate, which leads me on to the big men of politics. This is only a theory of mine, but I wonder if the origins go back to pre-colonial African societies. I know that there were many varieties of social structure, but the chief in one form or another was a common feature. Whether elected or hereditary, in a pastoral agricultural society, his duties and responsibilities were not onerous or complex, except, example, in times of war or other crises. He governed in conformity with tradition. So decision-making was not difficult. He governed in conformity with tradition again. So he had a rule book, as it were. The rewards were proportionally modest. Status, limited power, respect, and more of everything that everyone else had. More food, meat, wives, perhaps more cattle, more clothes, and better accommodation. Quantitatively, better off than his people, but quantitatively not much different. No enhanced medical care, private jets, shopping at Harrods, etc. He remained very much in touch with his people and close to them. With the modern politicians, these links have been broken. And by misuse of power, he has access to material rewards, which his people can only dream about. In fact, they are not his people. They are simply a means whereby he is enabled to further his. One can perhaps argue from this that this process reflects my earlier remark about loyalty to family coming first rather than loyalty to country. It could explain what one might call the acceptance phase of corruption. What it does explain what one might call, what it does, hang on, yeah, what it does not rather explain is the excess. By all means, look after your family, but this does not require a fleet of Mercedes, a castle in Germany, shopping trips to New York, and a bank account of billions in Switzerland. Which brings us round to the question, why do people vote for candidates who repeatedly let them down? Is it gullibility, naivety, a triumph of hope over experience, or because of local loyalties rather than appraisal of the big picture? Voting for personalities rather than policies clearly doesn't work. Going back in time, in traditional society where chiefs were chosen, people clearly voted for the personality, but the personality was someone who they knew, who lived close by. Policy was determined by the tribal rule book and not in disputes. In the circumstances of the time, this arrangement probably worked very well. And if the chief did not come up to scratch, he could be deposed, exiled, or executed as custom required. Incidentally, in referring to corruption in African affairs, I am aware that it also exists in this country. A rich country can afford it, a poor country cannot. And it is the exception rather than the rule. Looking back, it was only in the 1870s that recruitment to our senior civil service was by public examination rather than patronage, and that commissions and promotions in the army ceased to be by purchase and bribery. Be handing officer against the backdrop, end of quote. Against the backdrop of this introspective, this former colonial officer, we can begin in Nigeria to start where we should. Very. All I have read to you all this while, they are just introduction. History of Nigeria. There is some existence before Nigeria. They have existed centuries before the colonial thugs and their local collaborators decided to enslave our people for their own personal gain. Say, thank you so much once again. I want to quickly check something. If you think the audio is a little bit off, that's one reason why I want to also sort of fix. Usually it shouldn't be, okay? Because it's pretty much like the same position that it's always been. Of course, I was a little bit far from the other microphone as well. So yeah, I don't know. I think it should be better. Let me know, sir. Just reason. The microphone is a little bit off, you said, right? Okay. Let's see. Let's try again. I really do wish it is not that bad, okay? Because normally, I'll try something now. See if that stays still, and it should work. Okay. So we have some important dates here listed by this author. And I'm also going to read them out just for the record, especially for those who are going to see this video. And also when this video is, cut into parts for easy sharing and consumption and all that, okay? So let's hope the audio works better now. Okay, somebody said, right, it was only breaking like back and forth. Okay. Sorry about that. It's normally, I wouldn't stay that bad. I mean, much like that. I won't back that much, okay? Or now, there is this chronology left by the author, okay? The chronology means the events in history that we should just be aware of, including when they finally captured Nigeria. Listen, you might need to probably get this book as well, just for your own keep. And so when we start reading it proper, you will be able to maybe even read with us like that. Okay. So I'm so sorry that it's been a little bit off, by the way, okay? But if it is better now, let me now read this chronology and dates. These dates, you do not have to know all of them. I believe I can put all of these in about maybe 5-10 minutes video. Okay, let's start. These are important dates until the day that the colonialists, the slave trade, the colonialists, the independence, the coup, and all of that to today's Nigeria, before Nigeria. So April 1775, U.S. war, independence begins. In November, on the 7th of November, 1775, British proclamation pledging freedom for slaves joining British forces. On November 4th, 1776, U.S. Declaration of Independence. Then on that same date, right? So that same November, November 1784, Rhode Island passes law liberating all newborn slaves. In 1783, again, right, just a little bit roll back, William Pitt, the younger, becomes British Prime Minister. On the 2nd of May, 1787, Committee for the Abolition of the Slave Trade is formed under William Wilberforce. On June 9, 1788, the Association for the Promotion of Discovery of the Interior Parts of Africa was formed. On the 12th of April, 1799, Church Missionary Society established. You see all these things, it's listed on this chronology, right? They all have a role to play in the formation of the would-be country, Nigeria, like about 100 years later. Almost 300 years later. Sorry, 200 years rather, 1900. So to what will later happen 200 years later, that's why you need to pay attention to this, kind of date, okay? Right. So on the 29th of May, 1804, Fulani Jihad against Hausa nations, Hausa nation begins. On the, May 1814, Napoleon Bonaparte was defeated. On the 1st of November 1814, Congress of Vienna was formed. On the 1st of October 1818 to 1832, right? Congress of Aix-Chapelle was formed. Richard Landau identified source of the River Niger. So by the 18th of November 1830, Palmerston becomes Foreign Minister of Britain. On August 28, 1833, abolition of slave trade. Slave trade was abolished, started. By 1837, first publication of Thomas Powell Buxton's The African Slave Trade and Its Remedy. By 1841, Niger Expedition. By 1845, Soko dethrones King Akintoye of Lagos. By July 1846, the beginning of Abeokuta CMS mission. By December 25, 1851, the British bombardment of Lagos. By 1854, the British deposed King Pepu of Bonny. By 1858, the British colonization of India. By 1859, Henry Townsend publishes first newspaper in Nigeria. By 1860, the beginning of Yoruba Civil War. August 6, 1861, British declare Lagos as a colony. 1873, British war against the Ashantis. By 1884, the Berlin Conference. Same 1884, the Maxim gun invented. By June 5, 1885, wow, 1984. So I was born 100 years after the Berlin Conference, where they shared Africa. I was born 100 years after that. I was born in 1984. So 1884 is significant. I will put that in my memory till I die now. I've been talking about Berlin Conference. I've been so specific about the date and all that, right? Great. By June 5, 1885, British declare oil rivers protectorate. By July 1886, grant of the Royal Charter to Niger Company. By September 23, 1886, end of Yoruba Civil War. September 19, 1887, British depose Jaja of Oko. January 18, 1896, British treaty with Egba confirming independence of the Egba United Kingdom. By 1894, British depose and deport Nana of the Shekiri. By January 22nd, 1895, Rasmen destroyed Royal Niger Company Depot at Akasa. By February 22nd, 1895, too, Akasa Massacre, British dethrone Koko of Nembe. By January 27, 1897, British conquest of Bida. By February 16, 1897, British conquest of Ilorin. February 18, 1897, British conquest of Benin. January 1, 1900, Charter of Royal Niger Company revoked and protectorates of northern and southern Nigeria proclaimed. At the same January 1900, French conquest of Borno. February 3rd, 1903, British conquest of Kano. That same February 1903, British conquest of Sokoto. That same February 1903, British expedition against Tifi people. By October 16, 1905, British partitioning of Bengal, India. By February 26, 1906, amalgamation of Lagos Colony and southern Nigeria under Governor Walter Egerton. By February 1906, that same February 1906, September 1906, Frederick Lugard resigned as High Commissioner of Northern Nigeria. That same September 1906, oil exploration begins in southern Nigeria. How many of you remember when they started talking about 1957? Oil was discovered in Oloibiri. You see this history. You are going to know where that oil exploration started in Nigeria. And I can tell you, even though it is not Oloibiri, history. But let's continue, Sha. September 1906, oil exploration begins in southern Nigeria. By November 1908, oil production began in southern Nigeria. By 1911, November, publication of E.D. Morel's Nigeria, Its People and Its Problems. By May 1912, Frederick Lugard record to effect amalgamation of southern Nigeria and northern Nigeria.